This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and it's in springtime. A woman's thoughts turn to bench pressing ThinkPad, 14-inch business ThinkPads particularly. No, not really, but it says something that these are actually so light that I'm not, turning purple in the face and going, oh my God, they're so heavy. This is to help those of you who know you want a 14-inch slim and light ThinkPad Ultrabook, but you can't figure out exactly which one because there's so much overlap. We have the X1 Carbon, 6th generation, which is the slimmest and the lightest. Then we have the ThinkPad T480, which is the kind of MacGyver of 14-inch Ultrabooks, despite the fact that it's thin and relatively light. It's quite expandable and has some nifty features. And then in between, literally, we have the ThinkPad T480S if you just want it thinner and lighter and you don't care so much about, well, some of the expandability. So this really isn't a smackdown, the kind that's going to say one is better than the other. It's a Dell versus Lenovo or something. This is really just to help you figure out which is which because there's so much overlap. We're going to figure it out now. Well, first off, the X1 Carbon is the lean, mean fighting machine. It's the thinnest, it's the lightest among the ThinkPads in this category, and that's its claim to fame. It's sort of like Dell with the XPS 13 with its ultra lightweight and its small footprint. It's the halo device, so you can't get any thinner, you can't get any lighter in this 14-inch segment in Lenovo. In fact, it's even among some of the other series, it's still thinner and it's still lighter. So you can see on screen there how the weights are going to go up with each of these, and the thickness is going to increase by, just a couple of millimeters between them. The T480, which used to be a super chunky monkey, no longer is, so it's not as huge a difference as it used to be. I can tell you from handling and reviewing and using all three of these that the weight difference is noticeable, despite the fact it's not a lot of weight difference. The X1 Carbon is that when you pick them, you just go, wee, it's so light. I mean, yeah, you can feel it. Now, if you're one of those manly men with the big muscles and all that kind of thing, you're probably not going to notice as much. But for us average people, that's techno nerds, yeah, you'll notice. Next up is the pricing difference. Now, the X1 Carbon typically is the most expensive, being the Halo device, the most prestigious, yada, yada, yada. Well, it's already coming down in price because every time Lenovo comes out with a new X1 Carbon or X1 Yoga, the prices are astronomical and then they quickly drop down. So the price isn't that different between the X1 Carbon and the T480S anymore. So let's go over that. The T480, just the straight T480, is the most affordable. It starts at around $1,050. We're talking US dollars here because I'm in the United States. And that gets you a kind of low-end configuration. That's part of the reason why the price is lower. You get a Core i5, you get 4 gigs of RAM, the others start with 8 gigs of RAM, and you get a 500 gig hard drive, not an SSD for that base price. Oh, and a 1366 by 768 display. So sure, it starts cheaper, but that's more for the IT department that has to buy a bunch of laptops that are affordable yet durable, business-oriented, yada, yada. You get the idea. A lot of you out there who are buying them for yourselves are going to want something more well configured. And then the price of the T480 can approach the T480S, which essentially is just a more nicely configured version of the T480 in terms of pricing. The T480S starts around $1,358, but for that you still get a Core i5, which is fine, but you get 8 gigs of RAM, you get a 256 gig PCIe NVMe SSD, and that line starts with a full HD 1920 by 1080 display. So there you have it. Now the X1 Carbon now is priced about the same as that T480 for around $1,350. You're going to get a Core i5, 8 gigs of RAM, and a 256 gig PCIe NVMe SSD, and a full HD display. So there you have it. The pricing is not going to help you make much of a decision there. In other words, once you configure these all similarly, the price is going to be about the same. Now, when it comes to quality, they're all actually built to the same fairly high standard. These are mil-spec kind of rugged laptops, despite the fact they're not humongous. Same materials, magnesium alloy inner roll cage. You've got a combination of carbon fiber or fiber stuff on the outside of these things. So you're not getting better quality by spending in terms of casing and materials there, or by spending more, in other words, on an X1 Carbon. When it comes to displays, well, you've already guessed probably that the X1 Carbon with that HDR display option, 2560 by 1440 resolution, is going to be the bee's knees. It's one of the nicest displays currently on the market. These are all 14-inch displays on all of these laptops. And you've probably also guessed the 1366 by 768 resolution base T480 would be the least compelling display among these. But you can get a T480 with the full HD display and even a WQHD, but there's no HDR option on the T480 family or the T480S, any of the T-series models. So if you want the best possible display with that HDR option, it's going to be the X1 Carbon for you. Now the T-series, even if you move up to the full HD display, you can watch our reviews and see that it's not the greatest in terms of color gamut. It's an okay display. It's not, super fantastic either. The WQHD 2560 by 1440 option probably is somewhat better in that regard, but with the X1 Carbon, all the display options are actually quite good quality, so there you got it. If you care about color, I don't know how much you do, and you like that ThinkPad in silver, which is still kind of a new concept for ThinkPad people, you can get that in the X1 Carbon, you can get that in the T480S, you cannot get that in the T480, you can only get the T480 in black. So the other two are available in your choice of black or silver. Now here's a real important point that may not be as important as you thought. The X1 Carbon has Intel UHD 620 graphics, integrated graphics. Now the T family also has that, but it's available with optional switchable NVIDIA MX150 dedicated graphics. That's a super low-end GPU that's in a lot of laptops actually these days. HP Spectre 15-inch, for example, the Xiaomi Notebook Airs, and it's not a lot to write home about, but it does give you a little extra push. And like I always say, if you're playing Skyrim, older games like that, it can make the game more playable. You can play it at full HD instead of HD resolution at 30 frames per second, that sort of thing. It'll give your Photoshop a slight bit of oomph for the filters. It'll help Premiere a tiny bit. It's not a super duper thing, but it is a noticeable thing. So you can get the T480 with the optional NVIDIA graphics. You can get the T480S as well, but you have to go up to a high-end like Core i7 vPro CPU to go ahead and do that. All right, now that we've got that fairly small elephant out of the room there, the dedicated graphics option for the T-Series, there's RAM, and this can be a bigger option of importance for more of you out there. So the X1 Carbon, all the memory is soldered on board. It's not upgradable. There's no RAM slots. 16 gigs is the maximum. It's DDR3 low power, so slightly less fast than the others with DDR4. Does it make a big difference in benchmarks and actual performance, DDR3 versus 4? Not a whole lot. That part I wouldn't worry about. So if you move up to the T480S as the kind of tweener in terms of expandability, then you get one RAM slot. There's 8 gigs soldered on board. It's DDR4, 2400 megahertz, pretty speedy stuff there. And you have one RAM slot, so the maximum would be 24 gigabytes. So for those of you who are running VMs or doing heavy multitasking, you might be captivated by the idea of having more than the usual 16 gigs of RAM that you see in most Ultrabooks, including the X1 Carbon that's limited to 16. Lastly, the T480, being the most expandable, has 2 RAM slots. Nothing is soldered on board. Takes DDR4, 2400 megahertz RAM. It has 2 slots, so the maximum there is 32 gigs. You know who you are. If you know you need that much RAM, you already know what you're doing. Most of us don't need that, but there are some of you, again, people are doing software development, virtual machines particularly, that need that kind of memory. When it comes to drives, they're all available with M.2 PCIe NVMe fast SSDs. The base T480 model comes with a hard drive though, and they're sharing, watch the video review of that so you can figure this out, but there's a hard drive bay that has an adapter to take the M2 drive, so you can get that, the base model, with the big old spinning hard drive if that floats your boat. That's the only one to go with because it's the only one that still has a hard drive bay. The rest are PCIe NVMe M2 SSDs, so they're fairly comparable there in terms of the SSD performance, that is. In terms of actual real performance benchmarks, all that sort of thing, again, you can watch our video reviews of each of these models. It's quite similar. Lenovo's doing the same thing with these Intel 8th generation U-Series 15-watt Ultrabook CPUs, which is giving them a little extra wattage so they can perform a little bit higher. And they do. I'm really impressed with the performance on these. Sort of like, again, the XPS 9370. They're pushing the envelope a little bit successfully without a lot of heat and a lot of noise. The core temperatures on these are fine. So it's good stuff in terms of performance that they're doing here, but the same CPU options are available on all 3 of these, so you're not going to see a big performance difference there. As is usually the case with the skinniest and the lightest of laptops, you have not only the least expandability, as we've seen with the RAM slots, the hard drive bay not existing on an X1 Carbon for existence, but also the ports take a hit as well. So There's no Ethernet jack on the X1 Carbon. There is on the T480 and the T480S. You can get a dongle adapter for the X1 Carbon if you need Ethernet. The full-size SD card slot on the T-Series family that holds an SD card slot fully without any of it sticking out is an awesome thing, but the X1 Carbon only has room for a micro SD card slot. Now the X1 Carbon does fight back. Where the other two have one Thunderbolt 3/USB-C port, the Carbon has two, so you can add back a little bit of versatility with that, which is nice. All of these have the charger plugging into the USB-C port for charging. If you need 4G LTE, right now for the T480, there doesn't seem to be an option on Lenovo's website for that, but there is for the T480S and for the X1 Carbon. It's going to vary from market to market, country to country as to the availability of that. There is a slot in the T480, it's physically possible. I just don't see them selling it yet in the United States, and ours doesn't have that option. Lastly, there's battery life. The X1 Carbon and the T480S both have a 57 watt-hour battery that's sealed inside. All three have a 65-watt charger that plugs into that USB-C port. It's a quick charger, Lenovo's quick charging, which is indeed quick. The T480 is the one that sets itself apart. See, sometimes the least sexy, least skinny, less expensive one is a little better in some ways, and this could be really important for those who spend a lot of time out in the field. It still has the wonderful bridge battery system from Lenovo. That means there's a 24 watt-hour battery that's sealed inside in the front, and there's a removable battery at the rear. So you can get a 24 watt-hour or a 72 watt-hour. Obviously, more watt hours. This one is going to outlast the other two, the T480 that is. So, and you can carry more batteries and keep swapping them in. So for those of you who really don't have a lot of time near the AC outlet, nothing's going to beat that T480. It's one of the longest lasting laptops that you're going to find on the market right now, thanks to those swappable batteries and that large secondary battery option. Despite small variations in the thickness of these, the keyboards to me feel really close and very similar and excellent. Lenovo's ThinkPad keyboards are fantastic. Likewise, the trackpads behave identically. Same trackpad software, all that sort of thing. So not really a decision point there. To me, they all feel equally as good. By the way, there's one other 14-incher that's not in this comparison because it's fundamentally different, even though it is the same in a lot of ways. There is also the Lenovo X1 Yoga. So that's basically an X1 Carbon that does the yoga with the 360-degree hinges, and you got a pen option there. With these, touchscreens are optional. You can get that too. Of course, with the yoga, it's going to be a standard feature. So if you like everything here, you just wanted to have the pen and 360-degree hinges, it would be the X1 Yoga. So there you have it, a stack of 14-inch Lenovo ThinkPad business laptops. Hopefully a little bit demystified if you were having trouble deciding between the three of them, and the fourth, if you're talking about the X1 Yoga now too, which is obviously the one for you who want convertibles and pens out there. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this vid.